Greetings, everyone. This short presentation today serves to show you the Hungarian connection, Hungarian language connections, in symbolic themes around the world, in different parts of the world. So this presentation doesn't solely try to show you Hungarian as a superior language, but I may allude to the fact that Hungarian can be used as a control language with other vocabulary words from other languages that can help us to untangle these symbolic themes. I am absolutely sure that as an unknown person, this is not going to be as successful as it would have been if I asked Dan Brown and Tom Hanks to come in, to step in for me and to make this sound and look better than it is. And it's only just a short way of doing things, because it's not really a comprehensive look at what we could approach to make this come into light, like in a big picture. It's just a few slides of information that I am showing you today, and because I have written up already the text, please allow me to read this and to make it quicker than if I were to think about what I want to express in my own words in a foreign language again. So I'm just going to read this up. I understand that nobody is interested in politics when it comes to science, but we have to start with this, of course. So I'm going to start reading now. So while many people who seek scientific understanding prefer to focus solely on empirical data and objective truths, the reality is that the pursuit and dissemination of knowledge are frequently intertwined with political currents. In subjugated nations such as colonial India, the educational curriculum often becomes a conduit for knowledge filtered through the conqueror's worldview, subtly shaping perceptions of history, culture, and even scientific progress to align with the dominant power's interests. This dynamic is evident in 19th century Hungary as well, where during the Bach era, Habsburg politics influenced the promotion of the Finno-Ugric language family with a locality first mindset. I'm going to refer to this later on, what I mean by locality first. Subtly redirecting academic and public discourse on Hungarian identity and origins in ways that served the imperial administration's broader political goals. This ideological campaign was particularly significant because, unlike many nations, Hungary had proven resistant to military conquest. Throughout history, numerous great armies and empires had risen and fallen, yet Maria's kingdom, Regnum Marianum, Hungary, endured, necessitating a more subtle intellectual form of subjugation for the proud Hungarian spirit. Indeed, a core expectation we hold for science is its commitment to consequentiality and accountability, striving for consistent, verifiable truths that build upon established knowledge. Yet even in fields like history, which often draw on scientific methodologies, this can be challenged by political influences. For example, in Hungary, history textbooks for fifth graders have exhibited notable variations over relatively short time periods, reflecting shifts in political narratives rather than solely new historical discoveries or interpretations. So if I were to say to you that we have today Viktor Orban's party at the helm, and if we were to have the liberals come to the fore and take government positions next year, for instance, then this current state is subject to change. Why not? This phenomenon underscores how politically influenced narratives can impact even seemingly settled facts. For instance, within the previously discussed Finno-Ugric mindset, the endonym for Hungarians, so in the old interpretation, the endonym Magyar, which is the endonym for Hungarians, was often presented as stemming from a Hanti, Manchi-er linguistic construct, which would produce Manchar, and from that Manchar would come Magyar, where the Manchi is an endonym of Hanti people, and would mean man. By the way, compare this Manchi word with the German Mensch, by the way. How does that shake out? Which came first, by the way? Today, however, a different interpretation is frequently advanced, asserting that the name derives from Maugeris, a Hunnic king. This shift is in etymological explanation presented to young students illustrates the dynamic and often politically driven nature of historical interpretation. I mean, just imagine is that I downloaded 3 types of textbooks for the history class of 5th graders, and they came from the range of 4 and 5 years ago. So I wasn't able to download textbooks from 20 years ago or even from my time, and I don't remember what we were taught, but I took notice of someone putting up some video, or I don't know, maybe it was a blog or something, and the person said that it was written in the textbook that Hungarians were happily fishing in the Urals while the pyramids were being built in Egypt, and I couldn't find this sentence in these newly downloaded textbooks, but I would have taken this as a step forward to tie in to Egyptian stuff, but I have found a different way to continue into Egypt after this slide is done. So what do we have here? We have, of course, a map of linguistic groups like we have in Finland and other parts of the world as well, Urals and the Greater Hungary here depicted with the orange. So this is a linguistic map. So the Finno-Ugric stance has stayed firm, but what has changed is that they no longer use this Manchiar linguistic construct trying to explain the endonym for Hungarians, which is Magyar, but now we are allowed to use a Kutrigur or Hunnic king name, Maugeris, from 528 after Christ. And this has surprised me actually, but of course in the last few years there has been a trend of archaeogenetical influence over or opposing the Finno-Ugric faculty at the Academy of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, And of course, some other authors also show that these genetic markers are going to show some overlapping, and we know this culture to be a continued have had a continued presence over this steppe area, maybe all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. And we shouldn't even just start from the Carpathian Basin. Maybe we can even head from the outer extreme western edge all the way out to the Pacific Ocean, pinpointing a similar culture. And when we were looking at the yin and yang symbol, which comes later on, we can also show that some other people already shown that these symbols are found in the Carpathians as well, and some Chinese researcher or professor also shown this culture to be the same in the Eurasian corridor, it is called. Just imagine how a very Chinese symbol is shown to be not Chinese. If you get artifacts from a different locality, then all this Chineseness of the yin and yang is just dissolves in a second. And this is the nature of science, by the way. If you show things to be true via further analysis, then you can break the status quo that science holds. So this was slide 1, and let's go to why I try to go into Egypt a little bit with this depiction, because I wanted to show you that the name of this guy on the right, who represents the shadow or the dark side, they are trying to turn things around, and this is Horus on the left, and this is his uncle Seth on the right, and this is pretty much the same depictions from India, where you can see the Typhonian character on the right, which is Typhon is the Greek name of Seth in Egypt. So these are called the Asuras, and these are the Devas on the left. And you can see the Milky Way is looks like they are in a tug of war kind of battle, where these guys on the left try to keep everything going for the light to accumulate, and why these Typhonic, these dog-headed types, they say no, we're gonna go the other way now. We are going down, brother. We are going down. We are gonna plunge into darkness now. And this is can be interpreted even as a snake, and the snake is a symbol of the Milky Way, the Milky Path, you know. So these are important for us to gain understanding what was important for other civilizations, how they depicted the celestial dynamics, and what can be understood about these depictions, because obviously I think all three of these images came from Hamlet's Mill, written by Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha from Dechend. But I seem to remember I read this book like 10 years ago, so of course I have my notes here and there from this book, probably from the Hungarian version, not from the English though. And obviously there are two ways of interpreting anything to do with time-spatial territories or battles. It's either the yearly cycle of 365 years, days, sorry, or the precessional cycle of 25,920 years, if we were to count with that number, but that's a long topic. I seem to remember that these were tackled by the writers as precessional, but I'm not really sure now. So what did I write here for us to see? Exploring the true origins of a language, especially one as ancient as Hungarian, necessitates an approach that extends far beyond the scope of a linguist trained primarily in phonological analysis. That's the problem with linguists. They are trained they're prisoners of their own profession, if that is to be called a profession. A comprehensive investigation requires delving into broader cultural and historical contexts, such as examining themes found in astronomical myths, comparing the names of celestial phenomena, deities, and other significant concepts across various cultures. Often, even without explicitly seeking comparisons with Hungarian, these connections become strikingly apparent, revealing patterns that, once recognized, are impossible to ignore. Yet, in contemporary discourse, the linguist, whose expertise might be limited to phonology and grammar, is frequently awarded this chief position in this rescue team. It is like effectively placing a blind leader at the helm of a complex, multifaceted inquiry. This narrow focus is further exemplified in inquiries into the Proto-Indo-European homeland, or Urheimat in German, where linguists often dictate, or it is like if they were dictating the excavation sites where to dig for evidence, such as innovations like carts and wheels, key markers in their proposed narrative, and is more likely to be found. Subsequently, genetic data such as Yamnaya DNA is then brought in to lend scientific legitimacy to these linguistically predetermined conclusions, creating a seemingly cohesive but potentially circular argument, which we know from the likes of Laszlo Götz, the author of The Sun Rises in the East. You cannot get that in English print. It's only in Hungarian, if I know it correctly. And the name of the title of the book is Keleten Kél a nap. I can write it here. Keleten Kél a nap. That's the title of the book in Hungarian. So what did I mention here? What I was trying to say here is that the problem with the linguist is that he is given ultimate power, a monopoly over how the course of any scientific method should start with them saying something, and everybody should align with what they're saying. So it is true of the West, of how it is done in the West, and also true with the Finno-Ugric faculty of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Basically, we can say that the Finno-Ugrists are the affiliated with the Indo-Europeans, like a small sister or small brother reporting to the big brother, oh, everything is going well, don't worry, we will derive every Hungarian word that is not found on the tundras from your pool of vocabulary or Turkish or whatever. So I also brought in these pictures because the name of this Egyptian figure with the part donkey, part dog head. Sometimes it's called a tapir head. Horus and Seth is depicted in the act of drilling or churning, because I use the word churning because they are also using the word churn of the milk, churning of the milky ocean in the captions to the Indian depictions, images. And then Horus is like, yeah, of course, Horus has a falcon's head. We know that. And Seth's head, with this kynocephalic dog-headed style, you can see the dog heads much better here as well. You cannot really see this to be a dog, yeah. Maybe the ears are there. You know, this is called the Shah or Sa animal, the Seth animal. This depiction is regularly misinterpreted as the unification of the two lands, whether Horus and Seth are working at the churn, or this is just a more common case as the so-called Nile gods. Yeah, this misinterpretations often happen because, you know, it's incredible that some people are have spent 30-40 years of their lives within one faculty, or and they cannot see beyond what is possible because they don't know what is to be seen. And for me, it is very easy to see that this is basically the same. I'm showing this now from Egypt because we're going to show you yin yang, which is not Chinese, and we're going to show you some Kurgan artifact, golden artifact, where we can see also two figures, but in different, doing different things. So why I was showing you, because this guy's name, Seth, is very interesting, that it equals the Hungarian sötét, which means dark. In Germanic languages like English, shadow. Basically, this is the shadow side. He's the uncle of Horus. What did Seth do? Because before Horus came into picture, he made mincemeat. He cut up into 14 pieces his father Osiris, and Isis, his mother, picked up the parts and put them together, and then I think it was afterwards that he was impregnated by Osiris's artificial phallus, because the phallus was not found. And when Horus was born, Isis morphed into a new name, Hathor, and we're going to talk about that Hathor name because it's very interesting that foreigners, so not Hungarians, foreign scholars shown the Egyptian Hat to mean house, and we have hut as well, or Hütte in Germanic languages, which are these shed-like smaller houses. But we have ház as well in Hungarian, and we are going to go into that topic later on. But we need to finish this first. So Henrik Brucksch, a German, who wrote a book, Religion und Mythologie der alten Ägypter, if my German pronunciation is correct. What he writes, this is just taken from a Hungarian text here. Henrik Brucksch, a German scholar, without even knowing Hungarian notes, in the Coptic language. The Coptic language was used to decipher the Egyptian language. That in this language, Aset means bottom, lower part, underworld. And furthermore, the manifestation of the goddess Hathor. So this is not Hathor, Hathor. You need to pronounce the H. Revered in Bubastis is called Shettat, which he translates with the German words Geheimnisvolle, dunkel, verborgene, meaning, well, not in Hungarian, in English, mysterious, dark, hidden. So basically, he understood this word. I'm not sure if Brooks took any ideas from any Englishmen who were Egyptologists, but he got it right. And of course, this Shettat is some Egyptian name, is the same as the Hungarian name for dark, and this is what is given also as meanings. So it's very interesting. How is it possible that a Uralic language should have the same word with the same meaning in Egyptian? By the way, this word eset, bottom, lower, underworld. If you look at this, you see eshik, esh, fall down in Hungarian, eshik. So if you look at that, it makes sense as well. But it's very interesting that nobody mentioned here, not Adorján Magyar, not Brugsch, that so neither Magyar nor the German guy, is that Eset is the same word form as Esit, which is the Egyptian name of Isis, the goddess. Right? And if we go to, we can mention this as well if we want, is that very similar words come up with different meanings. So if this is the main topic of comparisons, what you do here basically, if you're Hungarian, we need to stress this here. If you are Albanian or Slavic speaker or Germanic speaker or Turkish speaker, and you use my method, you're going to find lots of words that you can explain from your own language, and you can announce your findings to be definitively showing your language to be some kind of originator, because your Albanian, Turkish, Germanic, whatever language looks to be fit for this position, to be an originator, that even Egyptian comes from your language. You can do this until some point, so you can show 5, 10 words or whatever. But if you don't look at the underlying themes correctly, you need to understand what is behind. You need to find the symbolism behind the words. When we get to kutya word, the Hungarian word for dog, one of the Hungarian words for dog, because there's another. We will talk about that if I don't forget. We will talk about that these words in not just Hungarian, in your languages as well. Not the words that they should be a semantic. So semantically, it shouldn't refer, or should not possibly refer to the meaning that you use it for. Notably, there is some symbolic meaning behind that word, and that is what the language uses as a connection point, and you are using a secondary meaning for materialistic life, basically. So it's like two layers to the same thing One is a sacred level, and the other one is a profane level, like up and down, like God and man, like sky and land or earth. You know, it's like a two-way interpretation with this mirroring from up and down, or like macrocosmos and microcosmos, you know, that sort of thing. But definitely, it's not just up and down that needs to be mirrored, but left and right as well, because this is a circle of life with dark winning, and then the light half wins, because this is the Milky Way, and this is the light half of the year, the dark half of the year, and everything is just turning round and round and round. So it's very easy to see these. Of course, if somebody doesn't see the easiness out of these images, then they can say, "Oh, this is a precessional cycle and this and that." But I think it's just the 365 day small year that needs to be read into these cases, not the precessional cycle. So there's a tug of war, Devas and Asuras, yeah. And the dog head, the dog is Kutya in Hungarian, which is very interesting because Kutta in Hindi also means dog. And we're going to be looking at similar word forms with different meanings later on. Yeah. And what's also interesting is that when I mentioned side, because there are two sides to this, yeah? One side, other side. The other side is the diminishing side, when we're going down. When I talked about eshik, meaning to go low on the other side, we will see that in English as well, British people say autumn, but mostly American people say fall, because the sun is falling. The zenith point during the day, you know, the mid when it's midday, the sun reaches a certain point, but not any higher than that, and the lowest midday point is at the winter solstice, and the highest at the summer solstice. This is very easy to see, but these things were big in the old days, and we are going to be looking at these things later on. So when you compare these two sides, side here, other side, in the middle there's the Milky Way. What is next to the Milky Way? It's not depicted here, but depicted with the dog head, Sirius, the dog star. So now you understand why the dogs come into the picture, because right next to the Milky Way path, or Milky Path, is the dog star. And the dog is the liminal symbolic animal that creates the transition from light and dark. That's why the dog was often used for burials. People were buried with dogs, sometimes small dogs. In Egypt as well, there was a big dog cult in Iran as well. But we're going to get back to this later on when we talk about procreation. Like the dog is basically the symbolic animal of free or promiscuous procreation. You know, the dogs, they don't care if you look at them, they're still gonna do it, whatever they want to do. And I'm referring to a particular activity now. So Sidus is one of the words in Latin for star. There are other words, stella as well. And look at the Hungarian word shoot, to shine, which is for the light half. But shetit, dark. This is basically the same word. If you make a slight inflection in the vowels, because shet is the same, and there's some et at the end. But basically, from the from the active or creative side, the light side, the dark is created with a small shift in the vowel. So we're going to be looking at that later on, how Hungarian is taught to be agglutinative language, but it is more than that actually. And what I try to draw attention to is that the word for dog, kutya, kuta, kut, shut, is like kutta is the Canton version of the Satem version of shut, because the kutya is straddling in the middle. So he is basically, on the left side you have shut, the light half of the year, and on the other side shut, because from the dog onwards, if we go into this territory, we're gonna go down. This is what's depicted here as well. Horus says, oh, I'm going to turn this way. We're gonna be in the light territory still. No, we're gonna go into the dark now. My nephew. You know, in the book Hamlet's Mill, Santayana and Dechend often points out the fact that it is often nephews against uncles, like in Hamlet. But Hamlet is also not a Shakespearean work originally, because it is found in Iceland as Amlode. So it's not like it's been Shakespeare. By the way, there's a link here, and I'm going to link this URL in the description of the video somewhere, so you can look. I added the website instead of a PDF site, because all the little different images are linked in the PDF as well to this site. And I like this kind of presentation of the poles, because we who are not taught these things, I mean, even a Hungarian professor says that even if you go to elementary school, high school, or if you go to university, you're not going to be educated about the precession of the poles, you know. So a lot of things which can shed light on etymological connections as well are not taught. So you need to pick up these pieces, look at different themes from around the world, and you look for phenomena like names of the characters of the story, like they are taught to be called gods, but they are not really gods. They are just doing something in a myth, you know. So it's not like, yeah, in some parts of the world, in Rome as well, you know, they made names of gods out of everyday concrete objects even. So it can be can be made into a fetish sort of thing, but it's really we don't even want to go into there now. So yeah, Kentum and Satem will of course be explained to be some kind of Indo-European language territory, but it's not true. The astrotheological theme can be mapped to a Jungian shadow personality theme. Yeah, it's easy to see. I mean, especially in the yin yang, where you see the dark half and the other side. Wait, because it should be like this. Because this is the light half, világosság in Hungarian, sötétség, darkness, dark half. So I should not put, it should be like this. We're gonna come back to this later on. So yeah, I mean, yeah. And we're gonna talk about the Hungarian base roots coming closer. I mean, I told you before, just now, if you are bent on carving out some accolades for yourself through your own language, because you're Albanian, Romanian, Ukrainian, Turkish, German, Austrian, English, American, whatever, saying that you are a big hotshot linguist, etymologist, philologist, whatever. Up to some certain level, you can find stuff in your own language that you can use to explain things in other languages, certain connections, whatever. But if you don't find the underlying concepts, the symbolism, then it's worthless. It means nothing, basically. So you can. I talked to some young Turkish girl who calls herself a philologist on Quora, and I think probably the last time we had an exchange was when I told her that it's very important not to go into self-delusion. When you're deluding yourself, that's the worst thing a human being can do, because we are under pressure from outside. Everybody wants to take advantage of us, in some ways. It can be even love, and we shouldn't delude ourselves into thinking that we are doing something right, or because you need to understand the concepts first, the proper context. And if you do not know the context behind things, then it's not going to be the right solution. So you need to understand what's behind all these things. And as I probably mentioned before, these foreign languages, Egyptian, Sumerian, Germanic languages, Slavic languages, all the other languages, can help a lot, especially for Hungarian. But as I said, let's not say just out loud yet that it is the Hungarian language that is the most superior, the superior language, because we're not going to be liked, because there's a lot of bias against Hungarians. There's a lot of racism, basically. It's not just Hungarians, it's against Christian people, the white people, people who like men who like women, women who like men, for normal relationships. Humanity is under attack, but before humanity as a whole has been put on trial, Jesus was on trial too, and Hungarians as well. I mean, it's you need to understand what's going on in the world to understand why we have to do this. Why is it only a few people who need to go into these details and try to pick off some words here and there. And as I said, people 150, or maybe not 150, 60, 70 years ago, 100 years ago, they also saw these names, because once you see them, you cannot unsee them, and you cannot stop making yourself from making more connections, because they come automatically if you read. And if you are reading also always the same kind of topics, you will see the patterns emerging all the time, and even you will see from 100 yards out what that picture is trying to tell you, and you can easily line up the words later on if there are vocabulary words to line up. And now we can go to the house word, because this was here the last word in Egyptian, old Egyptian. Yeah, let's write this here, because this is old Egyptian. This is not Egyptian like Arabic, Egyptian Arabic or something. Or Arabic, probably I will not delve into anything Arabic today. It would be nice, but I will not probably. So it is striking that Hungarian Finno-Ugric linguists chose to derive the Hungarian word for house, ház, from the Finno-Ugric kota word, especially considering our proximity to German speakers, whose word for house bears a strong resemblance to our own, given that in other linguistic derivations it was often deemed acceptable to trace words back to greater cultures, even those who sought our demise, such as at the Battle of Pressburg in 907, alternating between attempts to educate and eliminate us. One might reasonably ask why this precedent was not followed here. So why is it that our word for house, ház, is not derived from the German word? Because in so many other cases, they just do that and they are off to the cafeteria, they have finished with the job, that's it. They say, no, we will pick this kota word to align with your Hungarian house. Not gonna pick the Germanic word. Yeah? Because the answer is, it seems, lying the primary objective of our linguists, because we have picked our own linguists, correct, to firmly establish Hungarian origins in the Tudor. That was the number one concern all along. They are not interested if we have some word that will be aligned with the Finno-Ugric. This is just a pretext, playing around with the words, you see. The linguist is just for show, that he is doing the job of the linguist. But he's not really doing the job of the linguist. He is just using his status as a linguist to point our origins on some territory in a different land from all the other places in the world where they have shown different kinds of developments, whether it was the building of pyramids or whatever, because there's absolutely nothing on the tundras. And of course, I understand there's like 400 and something words common with the Finno-Ugric other languages. It used to be over 1,000, but it was ridiculous how these words were matched up, and still out of the 400 and something, there are still some words that are ridiculously matched up with one another, because the number one concern, as I said here, is that we needed to have our origins to be set far away from any developments in other parts of the world on the tundras. So this is a locality first mindset. Yeah. So it's not really about linguistics. So this mindset necessitated that if Hungarians originated there, because that's what they wanted, then their dwellings obviously must have been called a kota, because they had different kinds of dwellings there than in the heart of Europe. So it was not a house. So our has word should be aligned with kota, because we had different kinds of like huts, not so this is basically showing that technology wise the Hungarians couldn't have advanced to a level that they were living in some nice houses but some less advanced dwellings. So the opportunity augment, it also created an opportunity to augment the lexicon with Finno-Ugric commonalities, common words. One more word we can add to the tally. It was 520. Now we added one more, 521, ladies and gentlemen. And lots of people like numbers because they look at numbers. How many words are Finno-Ugric? Then they count them up as if it was gospel or something. Or how many words, how many percentage of words, of Hungarian words are of unknown origin? Who is gonna decide? I mean, bona fide, proper Hungarian words are labeled as unknown origin. Then why even count? It's so stupid. It's the same with the GDPs. When they talk about GDP plus 1%, 4%, whatever. Who cares? You make your own news. You create your own numbers. You lie, like Churchill said, famously or infamously. I only believe the statistics that I falsified myself. So that's the nature of everything today. It's everywhere is falsification and manipulation. And this Finno-Ugric faculty at the Academy of Sciences of Hungary is no different. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the truth. However, as is often the case, such ideologically driven approaches contain the seeds of their own refutation. These linguists, in their zeal, overlooked a crucial detail. The word form kota was not an isolated term, but rather one member of a larger set of words, all sharing the same consonant base. The underlying theme of this broader lexical family was rooted in sacred geometry and astronomy, where the KT consonant base specifically marked the highest point of the year from the sun's perspective on its annual ecliptic journey, a point associated with the dog star. And in Hungarian we have kutya, dog. So we have the same word form as kota, kutya, kota. But we don't understand yet why they should or they are supposed to be the same or not. We're gonna go down here and we're gonna talk about this in a little while. So this word form kuta also means mountain in Sanskrit. It's very interesting. This resonates with the annual period where the sun reaches its highest point, aligning with the dog star, a time when the weather becomes intensely hot for all, not just for dogs. It is no wonder then that these sacred geometrical buildings were also called kota or kut. Well, it's not really true that kut means pyramid in Egyptian, so we're gonna talk about this later on here, but it's just a reminder here that we're gonna have to talk about this later. People of ancient bygone civilizations sought to achieve harmony with the cosmos, choosing their dwellings to symbolically represent the upper world. Notice how our worlds kept their sacred and house meaning. This is the KT word cluster, and which points to a Nostratic root. So you can find all sorts of different language families here, all pointing to a common connection. Whether it is a sacred house or geometrical dwelling, again, sacred house, sacred meaning in Hurri language, Hurrian, kuta. But I think in Turkish, kut is also some kind of a legitimization for a king from God or something. Or kut means luck, like luck is like fortune, like lucky. You are either dark or unlucky, lucky, unlucky, lucky, unlucky, because luck is like, you know, a wheel of fortune going round and round. When you're lucky, you have abundance of light. When you're unlucky, you have a scarcity, like surplus of light, scarcity of light, and this is going round and round. So yeah, we can draw this diagram, but what I meant here is that it's when you look at other words later on, you will see that this simple symbol is like a triangle, but it can also be a pyramid. You think that the whole construct is called kuta or kut, like a house. You know these kind of houses or dwellings you can see even today in Asia, like it's like a tent or a yurt. Yurta is also similar, not quite similar, but because these are sacred geometrical buildings. What does that mean? They could have made their dwelling to look anything else, but they chose this for a reason, because everything seems to connect to the same thing, and which makes me think that it has been a deliberate design choice for them. It's nothing arbitrary, like, oh, this is nice, let's go with that because it's not. No, this is a deliberate design choice. And because in every language, in different language families have the same name as well. So this is the intriguing aspect of it all, is that in the ancient world there was a polar mindset, and the divine abode was placed in that pole star. And you can check Wikipedia if you don't believe me. If you check Anu in the Wikipedia page, it will be shown that the Alpha Draconis, called Tuban, was the celestial abode of that god thousands of years ago, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And people who are familiar with René Gugnon, I think it was king of the world or something like that. But I may be citing the wrong work by Guignon. But he wrote about how the ancient world's polar mindset shifted to solar. And it's not just about the fact that they changed to a solar calendar. It was about something else that probably Guignon didn't even mention. And what I really think it was about, people had to migrate from the north to south. And this assumption, this idea of mine is supported by many things, actually. For example, the worship of deer, not stag, because in those days they didn't care about the male aspect. They cared about the female aspect more. So it was not stag worship. It was deer, like a feminine form of deer. And they took their language. They took whatever constructs of the zodiac they had at the time. They took, or they had to forget, the polar mindset, because they no longer saw the pole star at the same angle as before. So it was much easier to look at the or Orion, for example, and Sirius, maybe even, or, but this is just 8 or 10,000 years ago. So it's not a big a margin. Humanity and the words and languages we're going to be looking at today probably go back to at least 30 or 40,000 years, not just 8 or 10,000. But this is a very important aspect, is that, first of all, when you come and you bring your deer as your sacred animal, and you find that, well, wait, there are no more deers in this locality. We're going to have to be shifting to a worship of goats, because these caprids, the caprid size deers, basically goats, because we no longer find those worshipped animals in those bigger forms that we were accustomed to in the north. And we're also bringing and trying to align new shapes in the sky, new asterisms. So this is how the polar mindset must have changed to a solar orientation. And when I said that the divine abode in the sky was in the pole star, this afterwards changed. And how would I understand this to have come into being? Is that the Kuta is in Hungarian, it means dog, and the dog star is on the summer solstice. And if this point is a top culmination point of the sun on the journey around the ecliptic, then it is no longer a pole star. It is the summer solstice point. So this shift must have forced the divine abode to have become the summer solstice point. So what happened here is that the main Godhead, but I think I'm going to be referring to this later on, so let's read onwards. It is also important to recall the early astronomical thought relied on sidereal counting, tracking stars, especially Sirius. Like in Egypt, they started the Celtic year with Sirius. Zothic cycle to mark celestial points. This changed with the introduction of solar calendars, after which the primary Godhead's abode became the sun's highest point in the sky, the summer solstice. And I just referred to this as that it is actually the main Godhead is substituted with the sun. This is how sun religions came about in the last 6,000 or 8,000 years. Because before that it was moon worship and star worship. It was, and of course, the sacred animals like deer, they were worshipped as a female, not as males. So this very point we refer to as kuta or kutya. In Hungarian is the dog kutya. But in Sanskrit, we have the construct Deva Kuta, God's mountain. So Deva already means God, Kuta means mountain. But there's another God word which probably originated from this same premise, because we find, there are linguists who are confined to their specialized scientific turf, who offer only a meaning of invoked for the God word. So they say God means invoked because the people who call on God to do something for them, they invoke God. So God means invoked for the linguists only. So this narrow interpretation overlooks a profound connection. One can understand now how this word came to be used for God. And this word form we can find in Persian Hoda and in the Germanic forms Gott and God. By recognizing that the agent of creation was frequently associated with fire. And we can find the alchemical symbol for fire here. This was the alchemical symbol for fire. Why? Because fire extends upwards towards God. Kuta is the God, the high point, the top dog, like in an organization you say top dog. Like in Turkish they say high is gut and kutsa, and husband is also kutcha, I think, because he's the top dog in the family. He will say what's gonna happen. Yeah, Turkish is also very interesting. I think probably if there was no Hungarian language in the world, Turkish would probably win with the most as the most able language to be found in other languages. But because there's a Hungarian, you're not gonna find any better, I'm afraid. And yeah. And in Old Chinese, and what is Old Chinese? Is it not Hunnic language? This word kut means soul. It's probably a head soul, because there was different kinds of souls in Asia. Sometimes two types, sometimes 4 types. Sometimes people had or had been envisioned to have 4 types of souls in one body, but usually 2. So kut, because the soul was often likened to fire, like a fiery, like substance that has no material nature. So it's immortal, right? Do we know Hunnic connections with Chinese? Yes, we do. Proto-Uto-Aztec in America. Kut. Well, not just fire, firewood as well. But probably if you go to Wiktionary, you can find all word forms at their own Wiktionary pages. Probably it's gonna say firewood and then refer to fire as well. The English word hot, again, fire. What is it hot? Fire? Very much so. But it can be traced back to Huta. Huta is a hot place where people can work with metals there, or glassworks. I also worked in a Huta once as a young man myself. I didn't actually, I wasn't involved in the production of glass products, but I was employed there as a shift manager. So I learned a lot of things there. It was a nice experience. Then we have Serbo-Croatian, kut, angle, corner. Kut. This is the angle. I mean, angle, angel. There are 4 angels, yeah? In the year, at the equinoctial points and the solstice points. Angle, angel is the same thing also. And of course, do not forget that kuta means dog, and it marks the summer solstice. It is a symbolic animal name, so it is not about the 4-legged animal per se. Of course, they knew the animal first, that there was an animal that they want to depict, because they understood about the characteristics of the animal first. Then they created the asterism or constellation based on the characteristics of the 4-legged animal. But the actual name that Hungarians use for dog, kutya, refers to the highest point of the year based on the what is the sun doing from looking from Earth. Correct? Yeah, and I forgot to mention, this is on the bottom is the horizon. And if this is the shape of the house, and not just the house, it's the roof as well. You see? And we could also talk about Jesus's profession, which is not a profession after all. Because if we say that Jesus had the profession carpenter, that would be an undermining of things, understatement. Because a carpenter, if English is not the right language to tackle this thing, carpenter, but if we talk about in a different language, like Hungarian, ács is carpenter, ács atya means father, and you can find different words also that will have connections with God, creator, In carpenter, you will not find the connection with creator. That's the thing. That's how important it is to, just imagine that in Hungary, for almost 1,000 years, Latin was the official language. But people didn't speak like Latin at home. They spoke Hungarian. So it's not like, oh, we should have picked up the Latin because no, that is the language of the clever people. No, our people never succumbed to this. They kept the language and they were singing their Hungarian folk songs, like 200, 300,000, easily the most in any countries in the world. So not 2,000, 200,000. So yeah, we can reflect on these widespread connections, and this is all astonishing. Astonishing. The same KT word form appears across diverse cultures and languages, consistently linked by ideas rooted in sacred geometry and a shared understanding from a time long before the emergence of the nations that seek to dictate our historical and linguistic perceptions. Yeah, that's the thing. The newcomers want to show who's the boss. Like in America. I mean, they wiped out a complete 100 million or so of Native Americans, and now they are going to say, "Oh, we're gonna eat Big Macs and we're gonna pull up some more skyscrapers and you shut up." Yeah. So the newcomers want to dictate. When the cat is away, the little mice, yeah, are running wild. Or I don't know how the English say that, but this is true. I mean, Attila the Hun dies, he is poisoned. Then Saint Stephen dies. I'm not saying it was 500 years later, because all chronological, uh, all chronology is like is in shambles. And there's also Andrew II, who led the Crusades into the Holy Land, and there's also another poisoned person, King Matthew or Matthias of Hungary, poisoned by his own woman at Habsburg orders. So when the strong leadership is gone from Hungary, then everybody wants to pick their own fruits from the garden of Satan's garden, because they are not really. I mean, just imagine, these people are not everywhere in Hungary as well, in political and other places. It's like communism. People are put into certain positions, because if there was any other person delegated or appointed into those positions, they would do better than those who are currently there. That's why they are there. So everything should stay in the current phase, keeping up the current status quo. That is the number one concern. People think that, oh, there has been lots done for the science of linguists, or it's absolutely not. No. The cafeteria has made very good income on these people, but we are not seeing enough from these guys at all. And there's been lots of manipulation and red herring on the way. Red herring kind of business. So we're going to get this right here, because I said that Adorján Magyar, a Hungarian author, picked this kut word. Let's see what he meant by that. How did he want to express this? The Egyptian name for pyramids is Ha or Ku. I don't know where I mean, Adorján Magyar read from usually, I think, German authors, not from English authors. I don't know if he spoke English or not. I know he spoke a few Slavic languages, some Albanian, some Italian, probably more than one Italian dialect as well, because he went about lots of places in the Balkans and in Italy in the, was it the First or Second World War? It must have been the Second World War, actually, not the first. And he made a lot of drawings, you know. I mean, if you go into this, I'm going to share these these links. And he made lots of drawings, all kinds of stuff. It's beautiful. I mean, it looks simple, but it's great that he had done all these things. And just imagine that in the Second World War, the first manuscript had been destroyed in a flood or fire. He also looks at shapes of heads and draws them. Certain people he saw. But all these depictions he had to redraw 30 years later, I think, or 40 years later, when he was in his 60s or 70s. This person. But it's all Hungarian, so you need to take a passage and then feed it with the AI to get the English. And even if you get it in English, probably you're not gonna understand 100%, because Hungarian is a totally different language. So there's a good chance that you're not gonna understand everything that he says. So this, if you translate this, you would still need a lector who would say, okay, it's good or not, because you're not gonna, you have no chance of knowing if that's what was meant to say or not. So the Egyptian name for pyramids is Ha or Ku. So he read from good sources. He didn't invent these word forms on his own just because he felt like it, or he didn't get these words from some gypsy woman on the road, you know. And specifically that of Cheops or Khufu is Kut in Egyptian, even though this latter word form is a fundamental word in the Kunik, Kuman or Hunnic word group. It is true that these names are interpreted from the Egyptian language as meaning crown, fiery, bright, but the commonly known Egyptian language is not Egypt's oldest. We, however, suspect our word kö, which means stone, in these names, especially since our people still call flint, just like pirate, firestone today. This is because sparks can be produced not only by striking steel, but also striking these stones together, allowing fire to be ignited with easily flammable material such as tinder or cotton. From this, knowing about the Huns' significant stone cult, we can infer that this was their ancient and later ceremonial method of fire lighting. This also suggests why the concepts of stone, fieriness, and brightness converged in the aforementioned words, quite apart from the fact that the pyramids were originally bright. Well, this is a lot of lines going round and round, but he never really mentioned, I mean, yeah, the kö, Hungarian word kö, and it's also in kuh in Persian and Sanskrit as well, meaning mountain. Kuh. So basically, kuta, in kuta, ku already has this shape meaning, but ta means kuta. Basically, it means that the tip of the fire symbol is on top here. So kuta doesn't mean the whole thing. It's just the tip. It's similar like Nimrod. Nimrod is the constellation Orion in Hungarian thought. But I have to say that Nimrod it doesn't really mean the whole Orion constellation. Only the three stars, the belt stars of Orion, should be counted for Nimrod, not the whole constellation. But that's just my it's not an assumption, it's actually well founded that I say that, but I think a lot of people will not agree with me because they don't know about it. I mean, lots of things we don't know because we have absolutely no cognitive assonance with the other person's methods or mindset. We have a lot of cognitive dissonance where we are we don't have the same set of dialectics to have a common ground, because some people say that, yeah, and it's also why the official standpoints will ring truest, because that is the safe thing, you know. That's the safe thing, because it's easier to say, oh, you are saying something that is not official. Yeah, it's safer to be the accuser than the one who is accused. It's safer to throw the first stone at someone who is singing out of chorus. Yeah. So it you have to be really brave to put out some stuff and stand by it. But it's also very easy, in my case, if I understand what's going on in the background of the symbolism, because then I can say why I can line these words up one by one. I understand if a linguist says that, oh wait, this word was originally a different word form, then you should not line these up. But even that guy, that the linguist, is not 100% that he's right. I am not 100% also that I'm right, but the word forms and the symbolism, they all check out still. And even if we say, for example, that Kuta is mountain in Sanskrit, and if you go to Kutja and you check out the Warao language from the north of South America, Warao is the name of the tribe. Some 20 or 30,000 of them in the countries of Venezuela, Guyana, and Suriname. And in their language is Hota, means mountain. But as you can see, even the Hungarian word for mountain, hegy, hot, even the Hungarian word is very similar as well. It's not too far. By the way, the English high or huge are pretty much the same as well as our word. And this is the Persian and the Hindi, kuh, mountain. Old Persian, kaufa, is not original now, maybe, or maybe we can say köv, kova in Hungarian. Yeah, I mean, there are many words that you can align next to each other. And there's also one more thing I need to say, is that when you take the most important words, like, yeah, there is actually an Arabic word I wanted to show you, which is nabig. Nabig means shiny, radiant. Very interesting. Why? Because nab means sun in Hungarian. And in Old Egyptian, nub is gold. And gold is the metal of the sun. And nabig is also very interesting because ig, you can see nab, nup, radiant. The source of radiance is the sun. Ig, the suffixum ig, is like in Germanic language, is like nötig is necessary, or ewig is forever. It's unbelievable. And you know what the linguist will say? They come from a different linguistic group, so they're not supposed to be aligned. It's just some strange coincidence or something. It's unbelievable what they're doing. And this is the last slide for today. This is 3 more images here and some more text. Yeah, I mean, there are some new stuff here. Everybody knows the yin yang symbol, but there is some other stuff. Lemniscate, what's that? And of course, some Hungarian mythology, Hunor and Magor. And are these really Hunor and Magor depicted on the Kul-Oba Kurgan artifact? We can only hope so, probably, because they're not going to write on this, like, it would have been nice to have Hungarian runic writing to put there. Oh guys, this is Magor and this is Hunor, but it's not written there. But we can make some assumptions. First of all, what do we see here? What we see here is the two figures' backs are touching in the middle. So you can draw one curve here and a similar curve on the other side. But that's not the only two curves in the picture. Can we see another two curves? Yes, this is the one. But this is a different type of bow, because we don't really see the curvature properly. Yeah. And the arrow. The curve is the feminine part of the weapon, and the arrow is the male part. You know, it's so we can say that this would easily can be applied an astrotheological theme, because he holds up the bow and points it slightly upward. He points it slightly downward. And we were also talking about up and down before. Yeah. So basically, when you look at that depiction, you can see that we have the same themes in Egypt. Not the same, but similar type of messages we can interpret from them, and in India. the two opposing sides, here they are facing each other. Here they are facing each other. Here, interestingly, they are facing facing us. But obviously there's a tug of war here. There's a churning, a turning, yeah, churn, yeah, churn, turn, the same words. Here, and also we can say in the yin-yang symbol, if you make a reduction of this, then you will arrive at this, but this is incorrect here, because we should take out the inversion. Now it's correct, because this is the light half and this is the dark half. So if you can see here, there's a bulge of darkness. No, we should talk about the light. This is the bulge of the light, and this is the other one. It's the hiatus, or this is the surplus, and this is the scarcity side. So if we were to take out this and even those, then we would arrive at the reduction here, like so. But with this curvature here in the middle, we also get the idea that this is a rotating motif, and in which case we could even envision this as a swastika with a cross drawn here. So this is easy to see. This is going round and round, and this can be aligned. I mean, this artifact at the Kul-Oba Kurgan can be likened to this. And of course, it's very interesting that the yin-yang symbol has its origins in the Carpathians. So in the same area where we are trying to find the forefathers for Huns and Magyar people in the Carpathian Basin. So it's interesting that when you think that, oh, yin and yang, oh, that's Chinese. Why Chinese? Because I bought at the market some yin and yang symbol stuff, and it's just a Chinese woman sold it to me. Yeah, everybody will say it's Chinese. If you were to say it's not Chinese, I think you would be chased out of the world. Like you would be told off that you shouldn't be lying or something. But here you go, Carpathian Basin. Even Chinese person found this Euro-Asian corridor with the same depictions and the same culture from 6,000 and 7,000 years ago. This is the depiction from a vase. So when you think, oh, this is Chinese, oh, this is Indo-European, this is Greek, this is Roman, you don't know the half of it, basically. You just continue with the propaganda. You are just like one of those parrots. You are doing a good job for the people who try to keep up pretenses, basically. Because I told you, Hungarian linguists are not interested about the Finnish. They need to learn some linguistics to show you the layman that they understand about their high science of Finno-Ugrism, but actually they don't care about the linguistic matches. What they care about is that they are clients to a higher circle. They are clients or agents, and they want to keep the locality, the origin of Hungarians in that area. That is the most important thing. The rest is detail. It's not even linguistics anymore. So these if you put all these depictions next to each other, and I also alluded to the fact that when you think that something is Egyptian or Chinese, you don't even know half of it. I mean, even there are other Egyptian names. For example, this sky woman called Nut, with her feet and hands touching the four cardinal points, and Itiphallic Geb is below her. You can see the stars, that she's a sky woman, and her name is Nut, and if you take off the T at the end of the name, then you would have Nu, which is the same as the Hungarian Nö for woman, and Nu in Chinese for woman as well. So you have three cultures with the same name. I'm not saying, because probably Nut means something else in Egyptian, and you would come back to tell me, oh, it doesn't even mean woman in Egyptian. Yeah, but how about this? Nut has another name, Nate, and she was also the goddess of the primordial waters. And we have the Hungarian Nedu, which means, or Nedv, which means moisture, and the Finno-Ugric Neite, Neiti, girl, miss, young woman. Oromo language is Oromo, I think Galla is somewhere northeast Africa. Nadde, Niti, woman, wife. So there's a it's not like when you say, oh, it's Egyptian, yeah, but, or when you say Greek or Roman, I mean, I don't even think that there's anything Roman in the world, because there's Etruscan, Samnit, who were there, Sabine, and there's also Greek element to Romans in the Latin language, Akkadian, Egyptian. Basically, it's Roman is like an empirical, an empire. There's no such thing, any other thing. Same for the Semites. Semitic people don't have their own culture, because they had precursors before them. Basically, being a Semite is a new ideology, like changing from woman worship to man worship, like matriarchalist to patriarchalism. It's going to it should be a little bit faster now. We're running out of time. So this is what we have here. The term Kuta relates to a broad set of vocabulary terms concerning the celestial sphere and the conceptual division of the ecliptic into two parts. In Hungarian, for example, két and kettő means two, and kés means knife. These concepts also connect to the English word cut, or Icelandic kut, but there's also Hebrew gad, which means to tear apart. Many other word forms resonate with this theme, such as the Sinhalese kutam, with an M at the end, which means two or pair. One might naturally assume that Hungarian could have simply borrowed all these words from an Indo-European root. However, as previously highlighted, there's compelling evidence of similar word forms and concepts spanning various language families, extending far beyond the Indo-European sphere. A critical point then emerges. Hungarian also possesses another word for dog, apart from kutya, is ebb. This introduces a new linguistic concept, but it's not going to be anything different from before. So we're gonna stick with the two halves of the year, the light and dark half, revolving or rotating, and two opposing characters, whether they are facing or not facing each other. So we're not gonna go far from that, but it's important to make note of the fact that when we used one word so far, kutta, now we are bringing in another word, ebb, and we're going to be bringing in another word, kon, which is male dog. And we're still gonna be using the same underlying symbolism and astrotheological theme, the revolving of of dark and light, constantly changing into one another. So we're not gonna be using anything else. And of course, even if we are to finish on this slides, on this last slide, there would have to be 15, 20 more slides here with different concepts and words, but there's simply no time. And of course, I'm not about to expand this into a big project. So probably, let's say there's lots of words that you can pick together, but it's very difficult to see how any other thing can be interpreted if not like this. Yeah, there's another way, using the so-called Istenhegy, what God mountain, but that's a different topic. Világhegy, actually. World mountain. But this is yeah, this is the lemniscate story. Yeah, this is what, but this is not being well done yet. Yeah, this is the world model. Yeah, so this is the triangle where An, or God, is the pole star in the old way of thinking. And this is the horizon, and this is gonna go down to the lower part or underworld, and this is the winter solstice. Yeah, this I made 5, 6, 7 years ago. So these need to be redrawn, actually. Yeah. So if we don't talk about the two sides, like the left and right, light and dark, then we talk about this and what comes below. So there's not many more interpretations than this, if we are talking about astrotheology. Yeah, there are tons of literally tons of Hungarian folk tales, and they usually again revolve around the son being the hero in the story, and he, like Heracles or Gilgamesh, he goes around the ecliptic doing certain things, usually trying to save some princess from the dragon and this and that, and but that's the same thing. We're going round and round and round, and light and dark, But as I said, the other part of the story is when we just using this kind of interpretations. But there's not much more to it, actually. So when it comes to certain symbolism, it's not much more to it. This is it's just variations of the same theme all over again. It's the same themes here as well, like here, but different cultures. And this turns out to be not Chinese after all, yin and yang. And when it comes to yin and yang, you're not going to see the Chinese yin and yang in 6, 7, 10 different languages all over the world. But the hunor, magur words, you will find lots of, but I cannot show all these today. I can only show a couple here to give a taste. So this is significant here, because when you have another word for dog, for this point, for this high point, then it opens up a new array of other words. Like, what are these other words? But before we get there, so there's a new linguistic concept that this introduces. While Hungarian is widely recognized in linguistic discourse as an agglutinative language, and such languages are often considered older than Indo-European and Semitic tongues, it is less commonly emphasized or even introduced as a language that exhibits inflectional characteristics as well. So this duality is evident in how words like kö, meaning stone, can have multiple distinct sound roots. For example, in the word kiyo, which means snake, we can analyze this as ki-yo, where ki signifies stone or earth, and yo refers to water or river. So this is basically the old way of an old analytic, not analogy, old analogous thinking. When people saw the meandering water across the land, they say, oh wow, I saw this shape before, yeah, in the snake. The snake is also meandering, yeah, like salamander is an S. The S shape is the snake shape, yeah. So then they saw that, okay, then we're gonna make up the word from ki for land, and the water yo. This is one interpretation for the snake. I think we're not gonna find a better one. By the way, when I say ocean is a Greek word, yeah. What was the original? Okeanos. And Adorján Magyar writes that okean is old, and kean is kiyo, is the snake. So okeanos, which we think it is a Greek, but if you if you do you understand about what is the theme behind the word, then you can say, wait, we have a similar word. Can we put them side by side? By the way, kuon, mentioned here, means dog, again, in Greek. But let's go a little bit faster now, because we're running out of time here. So another significant example is ebb, which is the second word for dog. And you know what's significant is that this inflection, this internal inflexal characteristic shows here. There's a single root here of two sounds, ebb, eve, up, up. So what do we see here is that there's the ebb, is the dog, where here, kutta is dog, two, kattö, two parts, yeah, and there's Gemini. Also, you can see the curves here. So this in the lemniscate, you can see, like here, we can draw the curve of the back. By the way, this theme is called arkadaş in Turkish. Arka means back and dash means partner. But arcus in Latin means curve. Again, it's incredible, isn't it? That you find, and you need to understand that there's always a before. There's always something that comes before that you understand to exist. So it's like, if you only know your father, your grandfather, and your great-grandfather, then you will say, oh, maybe that's all I had as forebears. Actually, your forebears go back to millions of years, probably. Because all your ancestors have made sure that you are here today. And you go back, your ancestry goes back, way, way back, even if you don't know them, right? Or even a drop of water in a river is carried through thousands of kilometers if it's a long river. And that drop of water doesn't know where it came from, because it's just one drop of water among many other drops. And you can see the curvature here. You can see, well, not here, but here in the lemniscate. What do we see in the lemniscate here? It's basically like two dials of a clock. But in a clock, you have 12 hours, 12 notches. We don't need 24. We need only 12, because we can distinguish between the light and dark periods, half days. So you have, if you put them side by side like so, this is the symbol of eternity as well, because so basically you can show this to be like circling around here, and you can do this as well. And why I chose this interpretation here, to show that the cutoff point in the middle, cut, is kutta, because there is, in this point, it's actually here, is not Gemini, because Gemini ends coming from the light side, and when the dark side cuts in or starts, it's already Cancer. So we should have put Gemini here and Cancer next to it, because in the middle is the cutting point of Gemini and Cancer. But only in Gemini we can see the two adjacent curves, which are the curvature is not really seen here maybe, but in the old days they either depicted it as two verticals or two slightly curving lines depicting Gemini. Why? Because there's two of them. It's a double sign. There's two of them here. So there's lots to talk about here, but everything comes back to the same premise, and they have the same KT here as well. But if we go back to the other word meaning dog, ebb is the symbol of procreation, the symbol of promiscuous lovemaking or sexual symbol. And this is the high point of the year where we have the dog, which is when the sun strikes down with the most power. This is the top peak power of procreation. This is what I actually write here, that all these words are connected internally because Hungarian also exhibits these inflectional characteristics, but linguists don't talk about them, but we see them to be. This is happening, and this is not the only place I have talked about this today, because I also have shown that should are just changing the vowel, and then you have the other really what is this what we're doing here? It is to show connection of one concept to another, because these are connected in some way. Why they are connected? Because there's a very thin line between light and dark. Actually, it's very interesting. If you're coming from a gray area and you're nearing, or you're coming, you are in gray, but you're coming from white, then you are looking at gray, but you're coming from white, then you will see gray as black. But if you're coming from black, from darkness, and you're looking at gray, then you're gonna look at that gray as light now, as white even. So, and even if you look at the words like black and bleach, they are opposites in meaning, because black is black, bleach is white, right? So you need to, and of course linguist will come and will say, oh, you didn't know that black and bleach, black and white are colorless. That's why they share the same root. Yeah, but can you say shoot and shut also colorless? Can you see what is behind this black and white changing into one another, like here as well, changing into one another? So don't say to me that black and white are colorless, because there's much more here at stake to see. So this is an interesting couple of words here, or three words actually. And of course, a father is a term that is used exclusively for a person who has begotten a child. So you have to beget, because Eve, you see, if I look at all three of these words, I'm not going to see a connection straight up between Eve and Appa. But if I know Ebb, and I will say this here now, that astronomically the dog star is approximately positioned where the sun transitions from Gemini into Cancer, the celestial point where the halving occurs. This is also where the sun's power is at its strongest, a force often interpreted as peak procreative power. It is therefore unsurprising that across various cultures, the dog was revered as a symbol of generative force or even as a procreator for humanity itself, like Pan Hu in China. So you can see is that Ab becomes Appa, dog becomes the father of mankind. Why? So why do these themes come up in China and in America within the Native Americans? I even translated some. Stories from English to Hungarian, and from English, of course, not from the native language. Obviously, they didn't think that dog physically was. They didn't understand where this theme came from, but they kept on repeating. The Herodotus, the Greek historian, said, I think it was him, who said that the great thing about myths, about mythology, is that you don't need to understand as the user, the end user. You don't need to understand everything about the myth, but you will still be able to pass it on without understanding. And this is what's happening here in different parts of the world. I mean, the dog was usually used for burials. Why? For psychopompus, to escort the deceased soul to the other side. Why? Because the Milky Way, the light and dark half, the dog is the liminal animal, the psychopompus in Greek, who guides the soul to the other side. So they were used for burials, and there's lots of places in Egypt as well. They used these puppies, and in Asia as well, all sorts of cultures. They used dogs because, and of course, similar thing when the deceased is placed on a boat, and the boat is set to go down the river or whatever. Because the soul needs to go back to the Milky Way where your soul originates from. And you can also use the dog. If there's no water, then the dog will carry, or they will put some money, like coins, on top of the eyelids to pay for the ferryman. So when the dog is not employed as the agent of the carrier, then they will put coins on the eyelids, So there's always some ancient thoughts about all this, and you can see the language, how the linguistics are able to be paired up. So now we can also talk about how this KT word, so to go back to here, Kate and Kettu, two. So when you say cut, it means to cut into two pieces, and we have two, Kate, Kettu in Hungarian. But if you go down here, in Hungarian we don't have the word cut, but we have cut, which means you put together those two parts to tie. If you cut it precisely in half, then you arrive at közép, which means center, middle in Hungarian. And while Hungarian lacks a K initial verb for cutting, it uses metz or mesh. And this word, believe it or not, aligns with the roots of medium, middle, and even the Meso word, which is found in names such as Mesopotamia. This suggests an ancient root mez, which also gives us an alternative word for the Milky Way, maize, honey, alluding to its similar whitish fluid-like appearance to milk. And I also allude to the fact that the Hungarian medve for bear is not necessarily a four-legged animal who likes to eat honey, because the bear is also at the top of the Milky Way as a constellation. So these are symbolic animals, and if we don't know about this, then we're just gonna stick to the materialistic thinking. I mean, in ancient language, it seems to me that there's two types of interpretations. One interpretation is the sacred. It's the top or godlike interpretation. And there's the bottom interpretation is more materialistic, like profane. So there's an up and down to it, like a macro or microcosmos side to it. And then we don't know about this other layer, this upper layer, this symbolism or the symbolistic layer. Then we have no chance whatsoever to find the real meanings, to find the real etymologies. But linguists will drum on their chest, saying, "Oh, I am the linguist. What can you do?" Yeah, but these linguists are like stupid boxers, like in a brawl fight, in a bar fight, because they are in the club, they are protected by the interests of who they are working for. We can call them by names like the 21st century continuation of the old Jesuits, or whatever you want to call them. But basically they are working for one thing only: to keep the status quo, this globalism as it is, and keep everybody being manipulated and stupid. So this is the Hunor and Magor theme that we're gonna be ending our presentation with. This is Hunor on the left, because Magor on the left, because he is going up still, and he's not gonna be shooting at some snakes, and he's not gonna shoot down some aeroplane. It clearly, this theme shows that the sun's path is up and the sun is going down on the other side in 1 year cycle, in a yearly cycle. So these names, because if you don't understand the background story, then you're gonna be like this dude. What's his name? Mircea Eliade. Mircea Eliade is a Romanian-born person who worked in the United States of America. He has some good books and good sources, so I actually like his work. But if you look into this Myth and Reality titled book, there is some sarcasm he's using about the Hungarian way of justification for how they tried to connect the names Hunor and Magor to create some origin myth for the newly arriving nation in the Carpathian Basin. And this just comes after, just on the heels of the Romanian thought, as if they had anything to do with Western Rome. This is really, really interesting and really crazy, actually. But I am not surprised that Mircea Eliade didn't know about the deeper symbolism concerning Hunor and Magor, because even Hungarians don't know about it, to be honest. So yeah, this is not without some sarcasm here. Found a justification for the antiquity, nobility, and historical mission. Because obviously, if you look at the original myth, like Hunor and Magor chasing the celestial deer, or the wondrous deer, the Csodaszarvas in Hungarian, then you would think, yeah, this Hunor is a person being a leader of the Huns, or all the Huns put into one person, and Magor is all the Magyar people put into one person. And then you would say that, oh, we connect them with an end word, like so, and then their origin will be common. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, but this is not so easy, because if you think, if you go into all the side story, the background stories, and the certain word forms that hun kan, magor, magur, and also that, I only put a few words here, but there's like 40, 50. If we were going into that, I mean, just imagine change. If you say change, cambir in Latin, changer in French. Cambiare, cambir. It's meaning changing. What is changing here? What is changing here? Is it not changing? Changing. It is the same. So basically this cambia, cambiare, you think, oh, what a Latin word. Or what about this? Compare. Where's the, yeah. Junger is like joining, right? Joining one side, other side. When you look at these themes here, like so, if we put, this is the point that we're tying up the two parts. What is in the middle is the summer solstice and the winter solstice as well, because this is where, I mean, this circle should be a little bit smaller, because the second half of the year is a few days longer than the first half. And this is where we have alignment of Sun, Earth, and the dog star. The dog star was called Ishtar in not just in Babylon. Yeah, I mean in Akkadian times, because it was called Nin before. But what is Ishtar called? It's called the goddess of love and war. How is that possible, that two opposing concepts are connected to a single goddess? Is that love is connecting these, and war is connecting again these, but as opposites. So when it comes to two things, they can fight with each other, against each other, trying to counter each other, or they can complement each other, working with one another. So the same thing can be friendly or exhibit characteristics of each other's adversaries, right? So this is a theme where they act friendly, basically, because they're not shooting each other. Now they are opposing each other. I'm going to the dark side. I'm trying to turn the better way. Churn or turn, same words again. This is again the same thing. And if you look at the underlying words, then you find all these good things. I cannot go into all these Hunor types of words, but there's a lot of them. Like just a few, and then we're gonna have to wrap this up now. Just a few. Like Arabic hammer for moon. Why? Because the moon is an arc. So you're gonna get this arc meaning. Hamorim in Hebrew, well, it doesn't mean archer, as I say here, because Hamorim is basically means donkeys. But the donkey was changed also to a rebel meaning, because rebel means opposing. Yeah. So what is because the donkey stands for cancer. Acellus, the little donkey is in there's, I think there's 2 little stars in that constellation, Cancer. The many words that they're gonna stick to either Hun or Magor. Even Egypt has Kemet or Hamor, Hunor. I'm not saying Hun people lived in Egypt. I'm saying that the names, the celestial part of the names are reflected on earth, and they use the same word forms everywhere, basically. So the names which are central to Hungarian this origin myth and their combined use is often interpreted as a convenient way to assert the connection between Magyars and Huns, a link historically denied to Hungarians by those who claim superior knowledge. However, as demonstrated, we talked about up here, is that now things are changing. Now the little school children are allowed to know that this Hunnic king Maugeris could have been the origin of our name Magyar, but it's not the full story. There's always a fuller. There's always a before that you don't know about, correct? And yeah, it turns out these names are more than just a simple connection between two peoples. They are not arbitrary, but rather they convey deeper meanings. The Hun element in Hunor, for example, corresponds to the Hungarian kon, meaning male dog, which symbolically inaugurates the second half of the year. This connection is not merely a derivation from the Latin canis. Linguists have in fact discovered this KN word root for dog in African languages as well. The only true impediment to progress in this field is the self-limiting belief system prevalent among academic scholars. My endeavor is not a personal quest for recognition, nor is it aimed at gaining accolades for my country. It is a straightforward presentation of facts and connections, which, when enumerated, reveal a profound and extensive worldview of a forgotten civilization that we can still access through these words. Furthermore, the connections do not end here. The Sumerian Khan means to bear offspring. The Northern Kurdish Gan means to procreate, which equals the Chinese Mandarin Gan, meaning the same thing. but informally. So both of them mean a baser meaning of procreate, a more informal meaning that I don't want to say now. This raises the question of the origin of the word gene as well, and there's always gune in Greek, meaning woman. The woman who bears the children, correct? Who passes on. By the way, in Turkish, kan means blood. Again, meaning that you pass on your genes, that you have your offspring will have the same blood. You could say they have the same genes, but you can say they have the same blood. That's why you can say that the generative force, yeah, is male dog, the procreator, yeah, because that's when the sun is here, he is, or it is at its most the generative force is highest at that point. And then all these other words come from that same premise. It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, there's Chinese, there's all kinds of languages here, and this is an important thing to remember. And then we wrap this up with this bit of knowledge here. That here on the top is the summer solstice, on the bottom here on top the Gemini, and on the bottom is Sagittarius going into Capricorn. The top part is where the seemingly the procreation happens, and on the bottom at the winter solstice, where we celebrate the birth of Christ as well, the birth of the light. That's what we celebrate at Christmas, the rebirth of light. This is where birth happens at the western, the winter solstice. We don't have procreation happening like with normal humans. Women have sex at the same, through the same channel, through the same vagina, where also they conduct their birth as well. But it's different in celestial terms, in astrotheological terms. This is the last point here. What is interesting here is that in Akkadian language, it has, when it said, this is important, and then this is the last thing I'm going to say today. When you say that something means something in Greek or Turkish or Akkadian or whatever, we should always specify that particular word in that language with that meaning attached to it has survived into the present time with that word form, with that meaning. But we can't always put that this Greek word meaning this has survived with this meaning, because when we say it's a Greek word, it's a Turkish word, is magur is an Akkadian word. Is it Akkadian, magur? I just wrote there, then it's Akkadian, isn't it? No, actually not Akkadian. It's found in Akkadian or recorded in Akkadian as a phonetic sequence of M-A-G-U-R, but it's not Akkadian. How do I know it's not Akkadian? Because the sun is born at the winter solstice. Magur represents Capricorn. And what is going to be born there? The sun. What's the name of the guy here? He is the sun, born at the winter solstice, and at the summer solstice is taken over by the other guy. So there's two of them. One guy's two parts of the same guy. It's one guy half and the other guy half. You could have put these guys together with one torso, one head, like Janus at the winter solstice from Rome. Of course, Janus is taken from some other culture as well, because nothing is Roman or Semitic. So when I say this is important, yeah, but again, linguists don't know about this. I think some idiot linguist might have come to this same conclusion, because he must be an idiot not to align themselves with the rest of the idiots. When you say Akkadian Magur, and then you say, oh, it's an Akkadian word. Not an Akkadian word. It's just how we are forced to say that there's some semantic value is attached to a phonetic sequence, and then we say that that semantic value is attached to a phonetic sequence in that language. But if that language actually is the creator of that semantic value, we don't know that. It's just shown to be accepted that we should understand that like so. You understand? So basically, what I like to think Greeks or Hebrew language as recorder languages, Sanskrit as well. They're recorders. Latin as well. They're recorders. And what do the science make of all this? Is that all these cultures are really high cultures because they have so much writing. Yeah, but they didn't make, the writers didn't make up all the knowledge. They are just recorders. But science attributes to the recorders the knowledge as well. And anybody can copy anything, like they did with the Vedas, into Sanskrit language, because it was some other language before. You know, so there's always a before, there's always something behind, something else going on behind the scenes that you don't know of. So if there's nothing else you're gonna gain from this video, then this is it. There's always something else that you hadn't thought of before. Thank you very much for your attention, and all the best.